Kind of Blue does sound intimate and condensed and warm in spite of its coolness.
Why do you think that record is so fetishized? Endlessly, 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 endlessly.
It is super cool, you know, and it is easy listening on some level. It's never too abrasive. Just the cover, I think. And I think jazz, for the most part, sadly, has been reduced to a handful of records for the average human being. You know, they don't really dive into even Miles Davis canon. They know Kind of Blue. And they might have got Sketches of Spain to play on a hot summer day. You know, so I think it's kind of, in part, just the marketing behind it all that's kept Kind of Blue on the edge of everyone's tongues. It shows up enough films and soundtracks that it just stayed very omnipresent.
Endless reissues.
Endless reissues.
Endless audiophile reissues. You find the record everywhere. I guess it's the entryway. It'd be fine if it was just the entryway, but the fetishism, and I have to buy 15 copies of the same record, it addresses so many weird human traits and tendencies.
I can't get that. Why anybody would have 15 copies of the same record?
I mean, I guess it's wonderful for newbies. They want to get into it, but then it's that weird collecting thing, which also involves I'm going to push the button and be ahead on my tone poets, which is really, really great. To some degree, you know, Kind of Blue is the Sade of jazz. It's sort of the way I feel. You know, she's wonderful. You know,
I love
smooth, easily listening, really cool, really hip.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, more to life than Kind of Blue gets posted a few times a week. How often are Working, Cooking, Steaming, Relaxing posted?
Not enough compared to that.
You know, I mean, Bitches Brew and all those records get posted more.
Miles' work before Cooking, Working, Steaming, Relaxing is almost non-existent in today's jazz collector's mind.
It's really funny because I did a little Miles video and I forgot I had those records, so I put them up chronologically. And it's even interesting how the recordings change. In the early recordings, everybody's tentative. They're all tentative, but Miles is up front like a vocalist, and they're all in the back.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even the records that constitute the first great quintet, without being called that. But then, as the popularity grows on the working, cooking, steaming, everybody moves up front and become much more self-assured.
If memory serves, they had played together for a year as that group.
That makes sense.
Before they cooked, Working, Steaming, Relaxing.
Right.
Before they did those in 2 days. So they went in the studio having played those songs every day for a year. And that's why they were able to knock them out like in 2 days.
Those records, the second Miles quintet, those are like in my DNA. All that stuff is in my brain.
Weirdly enough, I love the interval between those two great bands. Some of my favorite Miles stuff. Someday My Prince Will Come.
Right.
I love it.
Right.
I love 7 Steps to Heaven.
I love parts of those records.
Yeah. What's that?
Well, 4 and More is freaking incredible.
Yep.
That's the album. I mean, from a drumming standpoint, that's the record that sent many, many drummers to the woodshed. You know, because
that Tony first with him.
That's Tony. Well, the first is title track on 7 Steps to Heaven is his first appearance with Miles. Okay. But I didn't realize till recently. I mean, you probably know this. My Funny Valentine is like My Funny Valentine and 4 and More the same concert. They just divvied up, you know,
right. That happens a lot, actually.
Let's go on to number 6. This is an interesting question. Each man made 20 LPs for Argo. Are you more of a Ramsey Lewis or an Ahmed Jamal fan?
Ramsey Lewis is a great R&B stylist. He's got the Black Gospel Church throughout his bones. That great group he played with L.D. Young and Holt. Those guys were fantastic bass and drums. Going back to the Daddy-O Presents early in the Argo discography, Ramsey Lewis is fun. And, of course, he has a lot of popularity in the mid-'60s with some of his more crossover stuff.
Christmas records popular.
Right. And what was the big hit he had in 65? I can hear it in my head right now. But he had a number of big hits in 64, 65 that were kind of rhythm and blues, crossover jazz. And he fits that niche. He's easy to play for people. But Ahmad Jamal is minimal and full of space and longing. And I don't know if you remember this, but Miles Davis credits Ahmad Jamal for largely reshaping how he played.
That's right.
It was that spacious approach,
right?
Minimalism. And Ahmad Jamal is very minimal and haunting with melodic pauses.
Very original.
Space that kind of just empties out itself. and they'll come back in and tinkle some. They both made a massive quantity of music for that label for Argo. But I'll probably go with Jamal.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, Ahmad Jamal is a much more important figure. Like you said, he's a big influence on Miles Davis. That track Poinciana with Vernio Fournier, who was an amazing thrush player, that's a really important track. And the stuff he's playing, it's a really unique groove. That's something that a lot of drummers have studied and aped. I kind of think of Ramsey Lewis as the Black George Shearing. I don't know. That guy does nothing for me. Just those records just don't seem to have any weight or anything. But you answer the question. That was where Young Holt Limited came from, was Ramsey Lewis. Yep. Right. Yep. And those records are funkier than the Ramsey Lewis. I mean, I'm going to get a hate mail, I guess, from people who love Ramsey Lewis, but they're totally different. Ahmad Jamal and Ramsey Lewis, but a good
Young Holt stuff goes more towards R&B.
I'm writing it. Well, I already wrote it, a history of jazz drumming piece for Stereophile. So I was able to put together a listing thing of titles. And when I saw that question, I realized I forgot to include Vernio Fournier with Ahmad Jamal. Bossa or not to bossa? This is a pet peeve with me, and I'll go first. Bossa Nova, a Brazilian popular contemporary music of the 60s and 70s, late 50s, is just incredible music and harder to find than anything, harder to find than any jazz records. They just don't exist. And I'll show off the few that I think should be reissued that are just amazing records. Quarteto M. Psi, an amazing vocal group. A Louis Bonfer record. I forgot where I found this. I mean, just Elis Regina, one of the most popular artists in Brazil, I think overdosed or something. She died really young. This record you can kind of find, João Gilberto, the guy who wrote Girl from Ipanema, Vinicius Menores, and why this record has not been reissued. I got no idea for the cover alone. Right. Costa. I mean, it is such a huge world of music. It's a universe. And I would think Elenco, the big Brazilian label, must be owned by Universal, I guess. I mean,
were those all Brazilian LPs?
Yeah, I pulled like those was like some of my favorites, and they are so impossible to find.
Try finding them in the Midwest.
You can still find the Sergio Mendes records. Those are sort of easy to find. Yeah. We used to have a store here in New York called Tropicalian Furs that closed. It just sold Brazilian music. Why is this question bossa or not to bossa?
It's just, are you a bossa fan or are you not a bossa fan?
Isn't everybody?
I'm surprised they meet a lot of people, or not meet, but hear a lot of people comment how they don't like it.
What happens when you play that music on gigs?
People love it.
Right.
People, they can feel the sand between their toes and the coconut oil dripping down their chin. It's wonderful. And when you live in Minnesota and you get 2 months of nice weather, you'll take every added incentive to think about the sun that you can get here. My favorite bossa record, believe it or not, is the Antonio Carlos Jobim record. It's just called that, I think, on Verve. I love all the simple, basic finger piano he's doing on Corcovado and One Note Samba, Meditation, Agua de Beber. They're all kind of these very basic, staple versions of all these songs. They're a great way to kind of introduce yourself to the language of the bossa nova. And so much of that record is kind of crept into modern pop culture that it's going to be much more familiar than you think it will be. You'll know and recognize a lot of those tunes. And I know I hear them in film all the time. I do love Louis Bonfa. There's a guy by the name of Bolo Sete who's pretty fun. But Verve really kind of takes the lead in terms of doing the bossa nova. Creed Taylor recognized it was going to be a cash cow.
And they had the Stan Getz record that made the explosion in the U.S. So
and Astrid Gilberto and all those records. The Bob Brookmeyer one's outstanding. Verve really does a great job capturing that sound and then proliferating it without watering it down too much. It stays fairly substantial.
It's funny, even on the new Billie Eilish album, there's a song called Billie Bossa. It's a bossa nova. And
That's awesome.
She's singing in her very sensuous kind of come hither way. The next question is fascinating. I've had to deal with this so many times in the Jazz Violin Lovers group as to what I think constitutes a jazz singer or not. What to you makes a singer a jazz singer?
There's two answers to this for me. Number one is you can be a jazz singer if you use your voice like a horn and you're bending notes and alternating the melody, finding alternate ways. You might stay at the original melody, the first verse, And then the second and third, fourth line, you might be finding alternate melodic phrasing and singing like a horn. But I find the more someone sings like the horn, generally, the less people like them. A guy like Bob Doro is very much a horn bebop player. And a lot of people are like, I don't really like Bob Doro. You know, the other type of jazz singer to me is you're a singer being backed by a jazz group. And one of the tricks I've found collecting all these labels is that a lot of the great pop singers of the 40s and 50s made a lot of records, and the label is going to tell you a lot about what that record is going to sound like. If you're a Teddy King, for example, on Storyville, you're going to be backed by a great little jazz band, and that's going to make you sound like a jazz singer because you're just a little jazz quartet behind you. But if that same Teddy King on RCA with one of those big studio orchestras behind her, suddenly she's making kind of schlocky pop music. It doesn't even sound like the same singer. So A, it's your vocal stylings and your ability to kind of improvise, but B, it's also what kind of music is backing you. And there's a lot of examples of singers that when they're with a great little jazz quartet, they make great jazz music. When they're with a more bigger main produced Hollywood group, they sound like pop music.
Yeah, those are good concrete definitions. For me, blues feeling in their singing. Like I don't consider Lena Horne or Bobby Darin to be jazz singers. They just don't. They're kind of strict and they're square. And for me, you also get into the currency of the swing rhythm, which was still present in American culture up through the 70s. You can hear it on the Odd Couple soundtracks, all the, like the Tonight Show band, all that stuff. Swing feeling was everywhere. It's nowhere now. But even so, you had a lot of pop musicians. I had a record. It's a great record. The first record by a vocalist named Carol Ventura on Prestige. She swings her ass off. It's great. She's some like, you know, Italian chick from Queens or something, but it is just monstrous. But then, you know, is Edie Gourmet a jazz singer? No, she's not, but she's a great singer and she has a lot of soul, but it's really, you know, it almost gets into why is Sade not a jazz singer? She's an R&B singer. Never mind, there's no jazz rhythms or a jazz backing group. Nina Simone, Helen Humes, Mabel Mercer, Billie Holiday, Bessie Smith. I mean, you know, that's blues feeling and all of that stuff.
My rule of thumb is on, especially the female jazz singers, who I like a lot of them. The label will tell you everything. If it's some gal singing on Bethlehem, they're going to have a great little band behind them with maybe Oscar Pettiford on the bass, O.C. Johnson on the drums, some fantastic piano players going to be comping behind her. That's going to let you know that this is probably going to be great.
That's a good point.
You know, small label vocal stuff is so much more likely to be charming, and small labels don't really have the budget to put together these huge orchestral ensembles with string movements, and they don't have a big orchestra waiting in the pit to record like a Capitol Studios does, you know? So for the most part, if you see something on small labels, Savoy, Prestige, Bethlehem, Storyville has some great vocal jazz stuff. That stuff's going to be kick-ass.
But it's always hard to know. Like the Carol Ventura couldn't be more obscure. The first record is great. The second one is a dog. It sounds like it sounds like they said, no, that was really cool, but we got to sell some records here. Well, and you know, the first record, it might be Benny Golson or something doing the arrangements. The second one is just a tepid, dull pop record. It really shocked me. But there's you find so many of these records by, like, who's Terry Thornton? I mean, I'm saying as a question, she was very popular, obviously, but never hit it big. Or and now we have like Veronica Swift, who, you know, a young female jazz singer. Her father was Hot O'Brien, an important jazz pianist in the city. But she can sing. She's as much a pop singer as she is a jazz singer. But young singers aren't beholden to be in any box. You know, like there's another singer, Jazamaya Horn, I think her name is, who's a jazz singer, but I don't think she's really a jazz singer. Or just modern day singers are trying to make a living, and they could be jazz trained, but they can also sing pop. It's like back in the day, jazz drummers couldn't play funk and jazz. Now all these young black guys can play it all night and day.
I'll tell you this. None of my episodes get demonetized quicker than if I play a little bit of Bethlehem music on them.
No kidding.
It's the weirdest thing. I can drop Miles and Coltrane quietly and put it off, pull it off, not play it too long. If I play Bethlehem, I've had more of those get edited or muted or taken down, demonetized.
Can you look in the analytics who the entity is who did that?
Yes. And I
That
have
the owners.
I have, and I think it's Universal BMG, but I can't remember for sure. That's not my forte. Following what's happened in the last 20 years, all the consolidation of all the music industry, I kind of get lost past 1975 or so. Yeah, Fresh Sounds out of Spain did reissue quite a bit of Bethlehem stuff in the 80s and 90s.
Those are nice reissues.
I think they're digitally sourced, but the ones I have sound okay. And most of the Fresh Sound stuff I've bought, I've actually since found original pressings. What's weird about Bethlehem, as rare as they are, they're also fairly obscure to most people. So that means they'll often sit in online stores for a long time because no one knows who they are. And so I've actually found a lot of really cool Bethlehem records for really cheap for original pressings.
Which is like more expensive?
Claude Williamson, Stu Williamson, Charlie Mariano, all those great West Coast cool bop records. I found original pressings of almost all those from $15 to $30.
What, generally speaking, which label is more expensive to buy on Discogs, Bethlehem or Savoy?
They both have premier titles that are very collectible and expensive, and they both have a lot of forgotten names that go for next to nothing.
Is VJ below both of those?
VJ is out of Chicago, Indiana, Chicago Metroland. They don't really show up till 59. It's a bit of a later species, and they actually have an incredible Blue Note-esque roster of artists for about 2 years. Wayne Shorter, Lee Morgan, great piano player Wynton Kelly, Paul Chambers. They have a serious roster of guys that makes about 20 killer records. But those records have fairly good distribution. They're not nearly as rare, I don't think, as the Bethlehem or Savoy stuff.
I've only seen introducing Lee Morgan in our store once, and I bought it. The first pressing of that.
It's great stuff. Yeah, the early Wayne Shorter records, those are tough to find on VJ.
This is a clickbait question, but I understand why you're asking it. And it's funny that either one of us would have an answer for this question. Ken, what tone poets are you most looking forward to? And my answer is 0. I'm not looking forward to any of them.
Really?
Well, because I have all of those. And as you know, I still prefer, and I feel like I probably piss off Joe Harley, I still just prefer my original, or not even original. I'd rather, in many instances, have a Liberty pressing. Today, I'm going to do a comparison between my Liberty Ready for Freddie and the new Herbie Nichols compared to my original pressing and that, which is twofer. People sleep on these wonderful twofers. I mean, I like getting them, but and they sound beautiful, and I guess they sound more like what's on the original tape, but there's just still something missing. I can be a bastard about it. I live in New York City. I have all these records I've been buying for a million years, as have you. So I'm not dying to see any particular title. Maybe I'd like to see more of the Jackie McLean titles come out and whatever Andrew Hills they haven't done. How about you?
Well, my question was mostly aimed at stuff we know is coming with release dates. And that whole list of stuff coming out this present year, I've been looking forward to the Curtain Call Hank Mobley since about a year ago.
Yeah.
It was supposed to come out like in November, December of this past year, and it got pushed back for whatever reason.
Oh, wow.
So now it's supposed to be springtime of this year. And it's one of the Mobley sessions I don't have. It was only a Japanese release.
Yeah, I guess the Japanese things that only came out in Japan on Blue Note, those are definitely worth looking forward to. Yeah.
So I want Curtain Call pretty badly, and I'm a huge Hank Mobley guy. Anything from Mobley from 55 to 65 is always going to be worth my time. I always enjoy his sideman. And few people are more able to chameleon their sound to graft into who he's playing with. He's very flexible in that regard. A huge Mobley guy. I can't wait to get Curtain Call with a deluxe gatefold. They're really beautifully done. And then there's also on the same day, they're releasing that Jackie McLean record, Tipping the Scales, which is another one that was a Japanese release only. Right. But those are the only two in the pipeline that I can see release dates for that I'm really excited about, because everything else I either have or I'm not interested, but most of the stuff I have pretty much. And then down the road, stuff that I haven't heard about, there's some Ike Quebec stuff I really want to see released. his Congo Lament record, Easy Living. I have some of those with different covers. So I don't have all the tracks. They were issued kind of bizarrely. I would love to see those reissued.
Those are great records. Yeah.
Leo Parker rolling with Leo. I'd love to see that get a Tone Poet reissue. But Leo Parker is a really kind of forgotten name, a baritone player, and his two Blue Notes are both great. And the one was never issued officially in America. It was in Japan, rolling with Leo. That should be Tone Poeted this year too.
Along that same line, I just reviewed the Mosaic CD box set, the complete Joe Henderson on Blue Note and his Sideman sessions. And my editor left in all my prodding notions to Kraft, all those milestone records that Concord owns, Black Miracle, Power to the People. I forgot all the titles. They're all amazing records that he did in the 70s. And those are impossible, very hard to find in any pressing. They were never reissued, and they're just sitting on them. Something that could be an instant cash cow. I think people would eat up all those Joe Henderson records. There's about 6 of them, and they haven't done anything. And it goes back to what you and I have talked about, contested back and forth with the labels choose who they want to make a star this week. You know, Miles has that endless cool persona they can use. Coltrane in a different way. They can almost use him as a civil rights, you know, kind of guy to a degree. Lee Morgan even to a degree. But, you know, Columbia sits on so much incredible material while they just keep finding new ways to repackage Miles Davis. Drives me nuts.
Do you feel on some level part of that is, in spite of Miles' sour demeanor and kind of his jerky behavior at times, he's still never really threatening? White males are never going to be intimidated. Huh?
Jeez, he seemed pretty, he looks kind of threatening to me.
He's 5'6", soaking wet, 140 pounds.
Yeah,
he's not going to beat anybody's ass.
No, but his whole demeanor is kind of a, didn't he?
I'll give Miles a knife and a trumpet and still whoop his butt barehanded.
Well, but didn't he punch out Coltrane or something? But maybe you're saying he's amenable to a regular popular audience because he's not ultimately threatening. Well, look at that stupid movie they made. They made that stupid movie. They had to make up bullshit about him chasing people down with a gun and shit. So they're trying to make him seem like a tough guy. I hate all this. Hollywood never gets it right. It enrages me. Yeah, you know, they take like the Bird record. They overdub LA jazz players. That was horrific. Hollywood never gets it right. And to a degree, these big labels are the same thing. I mean, what is Columbia waiting for? I think they could make Duke Ellington, this beautiful, gracious, wonderful black man, genius composer, you know, that spans a century almost. But they just keep, I also think part of it, you know, a guy who doesn't post in my group anymore, who's a brilliant writer who works at Sony, he told me once, you wouldn't believe what we go through with the family of Miles Davis. So
I believe that.
I think the family is pushing. They want that money. And that just seems to be the case to me. He's an endless cash cow for the label and for the family.
I'll bet you that the family makes more now every year than Miles did in his lifetime.
Yeah, probably. I mean, with the marketing opportunities and
guys like Bob Marley too, like their legacy, their kingdom nowadays is generating more revenue than it was when they were alive. Last comment I got for you. If they were to make a Coltrane biopic, who would be better to play it than Denzel Washington?
Oh my God. Yeah, man.
He looks, there's times where he has this kind of intense look where it looks like Coltrane on Love Supreme. Like physically, even the demeanor, the spirituality, the consciousness, I think he would kill it.
Denzel's a heavy cat.
He would kill Coltrane.
What's your favorite Denzel movie?
Probably the one where he is chasing the little Mexican girl who's a daughter of some politician.
Oh, Man on Fire.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
I like Training Day. I've watched that thing a million times.
That's great. The basketball one with Ray Allen. He got game.
Oh, yeah.
Spike Lee.
He's quite a figure. He's a hardcore Christian. He's quite a figure, that guy.
Next time you see Spike Lee, tell him to get Denzel to make a Coltrane biopic.
You know, he's got his shop out in Brooklyn around Fort Greene. And
Spike?
Yeah, it's like a wall with all this stuff. Maybe I'll put a placard up there and do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, man, this was great. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you, brother.